our illustrious Executive Director, Barbie Brashear. Barbie spent more years than she wants to talk about at the bridge in Pasadena, and came into this lovely venture with on November 1st of 2010, and 10 years have gone by really rapidly. Also joining Barbie is Alicia Nuzzle, who is the director of our high-risk team, and has been with the council for several months, almost going on a year. It seems like you've been part of the council forever. And Alicia comes to us from previously being at the Family Criminal Law Division of the District Attorney's Office. She also worked for State Representative Jessica Ferrara and some other interesting places to work. She's a grassroots organizer. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Barbie and Alicia. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box and we'll be able to answer the questions at the end of Barbie and Alicia's presentation. So take it away.
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, everyone. I have to tell you, I'm flying a little blind, so I'm using a platform that doesn't allow me to see anything but the PowerPoint presentation. So when we get to the end and turn this off, then I'll get to see all your beautiful faces. I saw some of the names coming in, so hello friends, hello new friends that are joining us for the first time, or if you've just joined us for this series, or if I've never met you, welcome. We really appreciate you being here. Just a little bit of history or context for the Tools for Change series. One of the things that we have been doing throughout the past few months as a staff is really trying to think about what is the information that our community needs in order to give us information about making true and lasting change so that survivors have increased access to services. We as a community are finding ways that safely hold offenders accountable for the violence. And then also, we unfortunately continue to keep the honor of having the most domestic violence deaths in the state of Texas as a county, as a city. So ultimately, all the work that we're doing is trying to create pathways for change and avenues to safety so that we can decrease the homicide rate. So this series was born out of those conversations that we were having. How can we create a foundation of information so that we all have shared common language about some of the systems that are responding to survivors and offenders? So we decided that the criminal justice system is definitely one of those systems, and the law enforcement system is also one of those systems that we wanted to spend some time thinking and talking about. All of this work that we're doing is also centering on some of the work that Jill Davies has done. Her book, Safety Planning with Battered Women, came out several years ago, and she followed that book up with another book called, I'm gonna get the name wrong, but I think Theisha might be able to put it in the chat for us, but it's Victim Defined Services, I believe. And one of the things I love about this book is it's asking us to think about all avenues of safety. Safety, these are two quotes from her book. Safety requires more than just, it's more than just the absence of physical violence. Victims are safe when there is no violence, their human needs are met, and they experience social and emotional well-being. And she spends a lot of time talking about this idea of safety, and that it's more than just, if I leave or if the batterer is removed from me, then suddenly I'm safe. Well, that doesn't mean I'm financially safe, and it doesn't mean I'm emotionally safe, and it doesn't mean I have social supports and networks that keep me from feeling supported and safe. So all of the things that we're doing are really trying to embrace these ideas. I hope that makes sense. So in the last 2 weeks, we have learned a lot about definitions and words, including the criminal justice system. So on the first Thursday of August, Amy shared some incredible knowledge and information with us about just terms, and that's definitely something you can access on. I believe that Rebecca has posted it on our website for viewing, but she talked to us about what it means to file charges and move through the criminal justice system. What's a misdemeanor, what's a felony, what's a protective order, all of those basics about criminal and protective order kinds of cases. And then in week 2, Amy introduced us to some of her favorite law enforcement partners who gave us the basics about what happens when law enforcement responds to domestic violence calls. So we heard about the 911 response, patrol response, what happens. Folks asked a few questions. So we're trying to build on this knowledge. So one of the things that we thought we'd do is get you involved and interactive this evening and ask you to respond to a poll. And we want you to just think of some words. What words do you think of when systems respond to domestic violence cases? And you can text John Bickle 646. So you would text 2233 and then enter in the chat John Bickle 646, and then it will allow you to put words in. Or you can go to the website pollev.com/John Bickle 646, and you can enter some words there. So we're going to give you a few minutes to see what kinds of things come up for you. What words do you think of when systems respond to domestic violence cases? You can also put words in the chat box on the Zoom platform, and I'm sure Rebecca can actually forward them by putting them in the poll for us, if that's easier. So I'm going to be silent and we're going to watch as these words come forward. So I want us to just really take a second and look at this powerful word cloud, word picture that's being developed for us. I think this is a beautiful, unfortunately beautiful representation of how sometimes it makes no sense, right? The idea of us being able to represent this word picture to you was with that in mind, that it can be so overwhelming and difficult and desensitized and frustrating, right? Confusing, all of these things. And this is just a powerful representation of what it can be like. So just to deepen that just a little bit, some of you may be familiar and some of you may not, but we're going to show you just a short video of a story, that Rachel's story. So we're going to listen to this for just a few minutes.
All right, your turn, Portia. Come on, guys.
Mom, can we play till I win?
Audrey, it's been so crazy around here.
Girl, what did he do now?
Girl, I did it. I called the police on his ass and they took him out of here.
Oh, my goodness.
Mom, I got into the band. Miss Peters said I'm good enough to play the violin.
Mommy is so proud of you. I just want you to know that. I knew you could do it.
Hey, what do you think we should do for Mom's birthday? How about a surprise party? That'd be a great one.
Mom, when is Dad coming back? I hope he's here for Christmas.
Daryl, are you ready to go?
Baby, you know I didn't mean to do that. You know how much you and the kids mean to me. What can I do to make
No. Calvin, I've heard it too many times before.
Mom, those people are at the door again.
Oh, all right. Just tell him I'll be down there. Just go downstairs and wait. I'm on my way.
What did you do? Why these people tell me I can't see my kids? Oh, you're gonna pay for this. Rachel, you listening to me?
Mom, can I have a friend over tomorrow?
Portia, I don't know, okay?
But Mom,
I'm very busy.
Dara got to have a friend over last week.
Ms. Williams, I'm calling to inform you that you're past due on your phone bill. Would you be able to make a payment by the 30th?
I don't know. I really don't know. Hey. Don't cry. Hush. Listen, those kids don't know anything about you. You are a wonderful child. You are a beautiful girl.
Hey, Mom, Pastor Foy called. He wants to know if we could sing at church. I told him we will.
But Daryl, oh.
Mom, don't forget I have basketball practice after school.
I won't forget, Portia. I would never forget. When is it?
Mom, I don't feel good.
You don't feel good like what?
Don't hang up. Just let me tell you. Hey, the last time I talked to you, I was just really upset. Just, let's just work this thing out.
Calvin, no. It doesn't work like that, okay? Audrey, I do not know what I'm going to do. Girl, they are evicting me. I mean, I won't have a place to live. Girl, what am I supposed to tell my kids?
I know y'all miss me, right? Is Mom taking good care of y'all? Now, you know I'm gonna be home as soon as I can, but it's up to your mom.
Mom, when is Dad coming home?
I don't think Dad will be coming back home, honey.
He wants to come home, but he says you won't let him.
Oh, baby.
Mom, I aced my spelling test. Can we go shopping? Mom, can you tell Dara to get out of my space?
She started it.
Did not.
Did too.
Stop it!
So this is such a great representation of all of the words that you just said, right? This word cloud we have here. also describes everything that we just heard from Rachel. This picture, right? And that last slide said, Rachel has become increasingly uncooperative. Imagine why, right? We can all think of, and feel free to chat some of your thoughts about this. I can't see the chat, and we can have someone share that later, but you know, why might Rachel become increasingly uncooperative? In thinking about the tools for change, it's so very important to have Rachel and her kiddos, our families who are being impacted by domestic violence on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, at the forefront of that change. If we make change just for change's sake, it makes no difference. It has to be rooted and set in the context of the people who need the change to happen. So that's why we're offering this story of Rachel, which is the story of everyone that we're working with currently in our community, right? That's not unique across the country. Rachel's story is not unique, unfortunately. Rachel's story is the standard. Rachel's story is what happens. Rachel's story is how our systems and agencies are organized to deliver service. And the Tools for Change series, what we hope to have happen and why we're doing this, the whole reason behind this Tools for Change series, the why is, how do we make things easier for Rachel to access safety? How do we make things better for her family? So I want to offer a little bit of statistical information. Prior COVID, typically on an annual basis in Harris County, there are over 42,000 calls to law enforcement annually. That's just kind of the status quo that we have annually, which should be shocking and unacceptable. We have, again, the highest domestic violence homicide rate in the state. What we're learning, Amy facilitates a weekly call with law enforcement. And what we've learned through those calls is that we're seeing a 50% increase in domestic violence felonies. So the level of violence and the egregiousness of the cases during COVID have increased tremendously. We're pondering and assuming that some of that is because, one, it's even more challenging and difficult to get access to services, and folks are at home quarantined and in spaces where they can't access or reach out. So they're putting up with a whole lot more, right? And then we're also seeing this increase in domestic violence homicides. So we've had 14 homicides from March to July alone just this year. Something for us to really be paying attention to. And in that, 11 of those 14 homicides, domestic violence homicides, 11 of those were women of color, primarily African-American women. This is what the picture looks like for services. Over 70,000 calls to domestic violence hotlines are made on an annual basis, and that's prior to COVID. We've seen and heard from partners that there's been about a 30% increase in calls for shelter space post-COVID. Now, not all shelters are reporting that, but some of them are. We also have shelters that are operating at quarantine and what are they calling it? De-densified status. So where there might have been 2 families sharing a room before, there's definitely only 1 family sharing a room, so that the bed spaces are even more limited. On our best days, we have about 350 emergency shelter beds in the county, and because of COVID and the de-densifying, that has gone down. Now, one of the great things is that the city has granted some financial funding to what's being called the Safe Harbor program, which is an expansion of Houston Area Women's Center's emergency hotel system. So many of the agencies are collaborating in placing folks in hotels, and we have that resource until the end of the year. So we don't yet know how many folks are accessing that. We have a meeting in the 1st of September, so we'll learn more then about the numbers of folks that are accessing that. But even just from the high-risk team, and Alicia can share some of that with you momentarily, we're seeing definite need. Prior COVID, 70% of the callers that were calling for emergency shelter are turned away because of lack of space. So this is what the picture looks like prior COVID. Now it's even worse. And then ultimately, there are definitely more challenges for help-seeking behaviors during COVID. So I'm going to pass the baton here to Alicia to share some more with you.
Thank you, Barbie. And Barbie and I are going to talk a little bit, because I know all of this information can just seem completely overwhelming. And as we started from the beginning, in even sharing these systems, if someone were to navigate it and they're new to the criminal justice system, and they don't know what any of this terminology means, and people are calling, right and left, and different people are announcing who they are, and you don't know who this person is as opposed to that person, it's just extremely, for the word cloud that we saw, obviously confusing just to the average person who's not experiencing trauma and is not in a state of emergency. But for the person who's actually experiencing that, it's even more, it's even more dangerous, and it's even more scary to try and move through these systems. And so, as Barbie was sharing, and that's the lens that we tried to bring to everything that we do as advocates, what can we do? What can we do to try and streamline some of these systems to make it easier to access services? How can we get people plugged in? How can we listen to what they need and make sure that need is filled? And I think if you're doing this work, you're doing systems level work, while it can seem completely overwhelming, you have to have some optimism there. You have to have some hope. And really, when you think about all the great changes that have ever happened, it's always been motivated by people coming together and pushing systems to be better, to push individuals to think differently, push our community to think differently. That's why I love this quote by Margaret Mead. I'm sure you probably have seen it before. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And even when we look through when we think back to all the changes that have happened around domestic violence in Houston, it has been by individuals coming together and creating something from nothing. The Houston Area Women's Center, founded by a committed group of individuals, aid to victims of domestic abuse, started by a committed group of individuals. And so that's why we are very grateful and thankful that you want this knowledge, because we believe that coming together, good things can happen. Next slide. And so just to kind of talk a little bit, to touch on some things, to give a brief history, because there's so much that we can talk about that has happened here, especially in Harris County, by people coming together, as we shared before. Some of the things that stand out, especially in regards to criminal justice, was the establishment of the criminal law division, the family criminal law division within the district attorney's office. And this was established back in the 80s, but again, unprecedented for its time. It was a specialized division that was going to be focused solely on domestic violence within the district attorney's office under the leadership of Johnny, or the DA at the time, who was Johnny Holmes. And again, a committed group of individuals who came together, some of those individuals being the founding mothers, women that we attribute and thank for all the amazing work that they did, the tireless work that they did to try and get people to be more serious in regards to just to understanding domestic violence, responding to survivors, providing safety. We also saw the establishment of the 280th Protective Order Court, which was, again, groundbreaking in the fact that we had a dedicated court now that was going to be listening to receiving those protective order applications, moving them through quickly so that we could grant individuals safety and security for themselves and their families. The protective order court was established in 2008. And again, the Family Criminal Law Division was established in the 1980s. And I want to say that that was a very, when it was first established, it was just a handful of people, if that, maybe one or two individuals who were part of that division. And now it has grown to I want to say over 32 individuals who are in that division, social workers, caseworkers. If people are coming to try and, if people are wanting to get a protective order, they can go through the Family Criminal Law Division to get an application, to interview, to try and get one. If you have a high-risk domestic violence case, it's going to come to this division. You have individuals who understand, who are trained in victim-based advocacy and trying to deliver services, getting individuals, whatever, plugging them into resources, getting them their needs met, providing shelter, referrals to shelter and safety. Again, all started early on by just dedicated people coming together, recognizing there was a need and doing something about it. And we can see, even in the past couple of years, that there has been a wonderful focus on some amazing initiatives that have been started under the leadership of some division chiefs within the DA's office, under the Kim Ogg administration, Carvana Cloud, Mary McFadden. You know, they have been instrumental in keeping some of these initiatives going. And what for instance, the Strangulation Task Force, that was a concept that was created in 2017, where all law enforcement officers or law enforcement agencies had come together to try and develop a supplement, a way to be able to document those calls if they were called to respond to an impeding breath charge, which is a strangulation charge. You know, how to document for that crime. For those of you that may not know, strangulation is one of the more lethal forms of violence. For a very, very long time, people did not take it as seriously as it needed to be taken. I don't know how many know, but it's just a matter of seconds that irreversible damage could be done to an individual if they are strangled. And if they are strangled repeatedly, we are seeing, you know, damage to our survivors, traumatic brain injuries. You know, it appears oftentimes when officers would go out, there are sometimes no visible bruises. And so it would be dismissed. It would, again, not be taken seriously. And there could be long-term effects and even death as a result of somebody being strangled. So in 2017, there was a huge push to bring law enforcement agencies together to develop this strangulation supplement, is basically what it was called. It was just a way to be able to document, to ask questions and document what had happened on scene. And there was a part of that also included a map of the body, so that any kind of evidence or bruising that that officer could see could be attached to the report and to be able to help with some of these cases. That was implemented in 2017. And I apologize, I skipped when I was the gun surrender program that was introduced in the 280th court, which is our protective order court. This was, again, groundbreaking in working to make sure that we close the gap of having offenders who owned guns surrender that gun, because under a protective order, you're not allowed to have a firearm. And so creating a program in order for offenders to be able to give that gun over to an entity for safekeeping. Barbie, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? That was implemented in 2018. So it's a fairly new program that has been seeing some great success.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to provide folks more information. You can certainly email us after this and we can provide a lot more information, but just from a big picture standpoint, the gun surrender in the 280th court was our first part of what we're hoping to accomplish. We hope to extend that to some misdemeanor or felony courts in the future. And that was our plan prior COVID. We have a policy work group under Judge Judy Warney, who is a retired judge, she has been a champion along with Doug Warney, Judge Doug Warney, who have been champions of domestic violence and protective orders in the state of Texas for many, many years. So we hope to push this forward into some of the misdemeanor and felony courts as well. We know that when there's the presence of a gun in a home, a victim is 9 times more likely to be murdered. So having pathways to safety, including gun surrender in that pathway, is critical to decreasing the homicide rate.
Thank you. And so this is a great new program that's in partnership with the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and we are excited to see that it is being utilized, and it shows great promise, like Barbie was saying, to extend into other areas as well. We had talked about the strangulation task force. Now in Harris County, law enforcement agencies are using this when they respond to an impeding breath. So this also helps, obviously, in documentation for prosecution of those cases. So that has been definitely groundbreaking in making sure that we're capturing this type of lethal violence. The work that was done surrounding the strangulation task force led very easily into the creation of the Harris County Domestic Violence High Risk Team. And the Harris County Domestic Violence High Risk Team is a multidisciplinary team, basically agencies who would be interacting with the survivor, who come together to cross-share information, to make sure that we are all working together to benefit, to increase safety for our survivors, to help navigate the systems, to help provide basically wraparound services for that survivor. It also has it also strives to hold the offender accountable, and through accessing protective orders, through BIP programs, through no contact orders, bond. The basics of this entire concept actually was created by an agency called the Jeannie Geiger Crisis Center, and it's based out of Massachusetts. And what they had realized, unfortunately, they had lost one of their clients to a homicide, and when they were reviewing what happened, what they realized is that survivor had contacted all of the appropriate agencies, had done everything right as far as trying to leave this abusive situation, and yet she still was gunned down in front of her children. And so they started talking and wondering what would happen if we had all of those agencies come into a room and talk about these cases, and make sure that they were advising one another on what they were doing, and if they did have this type of communication, could there have been different could there have been different types of safety planning at different points that could have ended in a different, that could have helped make it end differently. And from that idea, they developed this high-risk team. And it's basically set up on 4 basic principles, which is early identification through risk assessment tools, this multidisciplinary team to cross-share information, enhancing the victim services, and then also holding offenders accountable. And so this was started in 2018 through a grant by the Texas Council on Family Violence. And in order to get the team off the ground, we started concentrating on impeding breath cases. There are different risk assessment tools that are used in order to identify those high risk clients. We use tools that are validated and measured tools, to be able to screen. And if those cases, if it does meet a certain criteria, then is accepted onto the high risk team, and we do everything we can to listen to what the survivor wants. So again, we plug them into services, and we do everything we can to make sure that we have safety in place for the individual and the family, and then doing everything we can to look at holding the offender accountable. It's been met with quite some success. We are excited about the fact that we have expanded that a little bit into Pasadena. And the exciting thing about the Pasadena project is that there is a risk assessment tool that law enforcement officers can be trained on. It's called the DALE. It's the Danger Assessment for Law Enforcement. It's an 11-question tool that officers use when there's an intimate partner violence call. So it's not family violence. So it wouldn't be applicable to cases where there might be an incident between a son and a mother. This would only be for intimate partner relationships. And what the officers go out to the scene, and they have this 11 questions that they ask. And if the client, if the survivor answers a certain amount of those, then it automatically gets flagged as a high-risk case, and they automatically get sent over to the domestic violence provider that's in their area. And in Pasadena, it's the Bridge Over Troubled Waters. So connection is immediately made to a DV provider, and that case gets flagged as a high-risk case as it goes through the criminal justice system. And so law enforcement officers really love it. They have shared that it has helped them with those cases and making sure that they advocate for those cases a little bit better. That was this pilot program just started this past year in February. And so we are tracking that now to see how effective it is, but preliminary stats are showing us that it is a powerful way to be able to identify those cases that are most at risk for homicide. We know that also in with providing services, we have multiple domestic violence providers within Harris County. And in order to get individuals where they need to be, sometimes we need to have advocates who are available to help navigate that, or help usher them to whatever service they need, wherever they are. And that is through the introduction of mobile advocacy. Mobile advocacy is, again, a fairly new concept. It's individuals who are able to provide those services immediately and to whatever they may need. So they're not based out of any of those one systems. So they're not based out of a domestic violence provider or based out of the DA's office. And they're able to help navigate systems and get individuals to where they need to be. With more of well, we all are very victim-centered in our approach, but the ability to be able to just be free to be able to provide those services. Barbie, do you want to talk a little bit more about the mobile advocacy as well?
Just a few words. One of the reasons that we created the mobile advocacy was to address some gaps. We kind of thought of this as a way to help connect survivors to home domestic violence service provision. So we had learned pretty quickly from our partners in the homeless services side that domestic violence survivors on that side of the work needed some access to advocacy. So we put the mobile advocates in place for that. And then when the high risk team came along, there definitely was a continued need to have that same level of service. We've created a Secret Sisters, we call it our Secret Sisters account, which is a flexible funding account, which the mobile advocates use those funds to get really creative in helping increase avenues to safety. It might be an Uber ride to court or an Uber ride to get their ID, or it could be you know, we've gotten really creative with how they've used those flexible funds from the Secret Sisters account. But that's kind of how we see the mobile advocates as a navigator within all of the law enforcement, criminal justice systems, to the domestic violence resources that folks need.
And they are extremely helpful in regards to the high risk team, only because there are so many services in Harris County that and DV providers that we might be able to access. And as you saw through Rachel's story, there's also several systems that oftentimes get tagged, so to speak, through that journey to safety. And so our mobile advocates are fantastic in being able to provide support, education, and in trying to navigate those systems. I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit on some of these programs. So we talked about the gun surrender program and the strangulation task force. You heard a little bit about the domestic violence high risk team. And one of the pilot projects or an offshoot of the high risk team and what we're doing in Pasadena. We talked about mobile advocacy. And now, you know, I'd like to talk a little bit about mobile units, DART and SMART. So DART is a mobile unit that is based within Houston Police Department. It stands for Domestic Abuse Response Team. And the idea behind this was to pair a law enforcement officer and a victim advocate who would respond to the scene of a domestic violence incident. And again, it's a way to be able to share information right then and there, address any kind of needs right then and there, and to get individuals plugged into whatever services they may be stating at that time that they need. That was a new program that was started with HPD again in 2018 and has been running ever since. It has been met with a lot of success as well. You know, but as with some of these pilot programs, it can only, HPD is a large agency, unfortunately don't have the resources to be able to staff every beat with an officer and an advocate to be able to respond to these domestic violence calls. So DART was specifically set up for certain areas of Houston. Some of those areas that are higher calls for domestic violence. And again, the idea behind that is to have an advocate right there on scene to help address any needs or any issues that might the survivor may need right then and there. DART was created, and then soon after, SMART was created. And SMART is the Sheriff's Office Mobile Advocacy Response Team. And they respond to all victim-based crimes, but they do go out on domestic violence calls again as well with an advocate, responds to on scene, and is able to try and give information, plug a survivor into whatever is needed at that time. One of the other things I want to talk about very quickly is the Cultural Outreach Project. And this is another innovative program that is based out of the DA's office, out of the Family Criminal Law Division. You know, one of the things that prior to COVID, but even now, but one of the things that we were really, that the DA's office and other leaders were really concerned about was just access to services, transportation being a huge part of that, getting to the places that you needed to be in order to get the services that you needed. One of those services being a protective order. Oftentimes that is one of the tools that somebody seeks out immediately after leaving a relationship. So instead of having individuals always go downtown in order to apply and for one of these protective tools, the idea was to be able to go out into the community, especially in areas that were that are underserved, and also in areas and within agencies that are providing specific services to specific communities. So partnering with domestic violence agencies, domestic violence providers to be able to provide this resource in-house so that survivors didn't have to travel all the way downtown to be able to access an application in order to get a protective order. That has been a great program that lends itself to leaving the four concrete walls of the downtown office, and a great partnership with other domestic violence providers who are already providing amazing resources and just allowing them to be able to have almost like a one-stop shop to be able to get the services that they need. Barbie, did I miss anything on any of those?
No, I think that's, it's, when I'm reflecting as you're talking and just in reflecting and looking at the list, it's a pretty impressive list of some innovations that I could not foresee happening when I was a young caseworker and advocate working in the field. So it's pretty exciting, I think.
So here we have, now we're in the midst of COVID. And as Barbie was saying, this is just bringing yet another layer of, or another challenge to an already under-resourced, underfunded issue. And we have already seen some interesting things take place because of the need to be able to serve our communities. And so it's a chaotic time, of course. It's a very stressful time, but it's also a place where we're excited about some of the changes that necessity is making us take a look at and push for sooner than later. Definitely time is not on our side right now for a lot of this. And so COVID has actually helped us in pushing for some changes a little bit sooner than probably what we would have gotten in the past. So these are some interesting things that are on the horizon. Again, everything always evolves, right? And we as a community need to always be examining whether our policies and our programs continue to serve the people that need the help the most, that we continue to listen to our communities, that we continue to listen to our survivors, to make sure that we are providing individuals what they need in order to have a life free from violence. And there are some exciting new opportunities we are pushing and we're looking at and we are exploring right now due to COVID, but also due to necessity. So Barbie, you want to talk a little bit about some of these? I'm
just going to talk just a little bit because this will also be our jumping off point for our last week together on this series. But diversion interventions refers to looking at ways to create opportunities for someone to not have to leave their residence in order to access safety. How can we safely surround the survivor and her family with supportive interventions and financial interventions so that they're not the one that has to leave, right? Our systems and organizations now are all organized around the best pathway to safety right now is for survivors to have to leave their home, right? Diversion interventions for victims of domestic violence will only work at their optimum best when we do that last bullet point, which is rehabilitation and intervention services for offenders. So having ways to have accountability for that offender that also increase safety for the victim at the same time. Those two have to work together, I believe. And actually, the third one here, flexible funding for me, those, again, all that works together, having dollars that are really creative in how we can use them to keep survivors safe. Our grant funding only takes us so far. We need to have the ability to be creative in how we're supporting survivors financially in the short term. And there's some really great research from some programs in other counties across the country where providing flexible funding has led to survivors maintaining independence and permanent housing. They followed them for up to 2 years after receiving a flexible funding of infusion, which was an average of about a $2,000 investment. So for $2,000 investment, this family is still safe, free from their abusive partner, and living independently in their own stable housing situation 2 years post-help, which is pretty promising when you think about how expensive it is for us as communities when we're placing folks in, emergency shelters over a long period of time. That's really resource exhausting. And then we know we have, as a community, a whole lot of work to do in reaching under and unserved populations of folks. We kind of think about the folks that are being touched by domestic violence in 3 ways. We have folks that will use the police or call the police for assistance. We have folks that will call domestic violence organizations for assistance that never call the police. And those that call the police that will never go to domestic violence organizations. And then we have folks that will never reach out. So we have to start thinking about ways to reach the under and underserved populations in very different and creative ways, and partnering with organizations and grassroots organizations that are out there on the front lines doing this work, and probably not calling themselves domestic violence service providers. They're doing all this other work, but they're serving their community and having a touch on a domestic violence survivor and may not even know it. And that's kind of why we put this picture here. And I think that Toby Myers is in the room, and she is, I'm sure, very familiar with our fish poster. And she's one of my mentors. And if you're there, Toby, I can't thank you enough for all that you've done for me personally and professionally. But, when you see the top picture, you've got this big fish, and it can make easy prey of unorganized and disorganized smaller fish. But when all those smaller fish pull together, look what they're able to do. So I think that's where we need all of the information and thoughts of you, our community, our folks that are working on the front lines, our folks that are impacted by the violence, and folks that care about what's happening in our community in order to affect true change. Anything you want to add there, Alicia?
No, I think that you captured everything extremely well. This is beyond, I would have to say that this really is a very exciting time in so many ways. There are so many good conversations that are taking place right now. And it's important that we listen to one another more so than any other time, so that we can make sure that we are uniting in ways that we can and pushing for change on so many levels, on a local, state, and national level.
I'm going to stop sharing. And I think we're going to have a few minutes. I don't know if there are questions in the chat. Looks like we have about 5 minutes.
And y'all must have done a great job, because there's no questions in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and feel free to put them in the chat box, and I can, we can try to answer them.
So as we're waiting for any questions that come in, week 4, next week, our last part of this series, we want to create some dialogue and conversation. Now that we've heard about law enforcement and criminal justice. We have some common language around definitions and what it means. We've heard about some innovative opportunities and interventions that are happening through the criminal justice lens and the law enforcement lens. How do we now think about the change? What change needs to happen? What are your thoughts about that change? How can you inform the coordinating council so that we're being better stewards of the needs of our community? So that's where we're going from here. Is that last week for this series will be that conversation, and then we also have to get some more feedback from you all about what other things do we need to be talking about. And feel free, if you want to ask a question, you can turn on your camera or put it in the chat.
Barbie.
Yes.
I just wanted to extend to everyone who's here that we have an awesome person who's overseeing our website, Rebecca Council, and so she is making all of these recordings available on our website. And so what I want to extend to all of you who are here in this space with us is we really want to get this information out. I'm sitting here and thinking, man, this is some good stuff. And so if you would, I'd love to invite you to go to our website. I know the first two sessions are already up. If you go to the training tab and click on it, all of these videos and handouts are going to be there. Share that link with people in your circle. If you're on social media, share the link, so we can get this information out to as many people as possible, if only so that they know what is available. So that's what I want to invite everyone to do, is that, I'd like to see at least 500 people have this information in their inbox within the next 30 days so that we can have a more informed Harris County, because that was the whole purpose of doing this.
Thanks, Alicia.
Well, we are almost out of time. So last call for questions. We, on behalf of the Coordinating Council, we'd all like to thank you so much for sharing your Thursday evenings with us.